Okay, so if you're thinking about getting into the best shape of your life in 2024, you're thinking of improving your health and going on a transformation journey, what's the number one thing you need to think about before you get started?
Me, I think it's where are you now, and then where could you be in a year, and what kind of, we always say it, what's the cost of not moving forward? So what's the cost of staying the same as you are now? And I think that's really hits home with a lot of people where they're like, oh wow, like if I still looked like this with a whole year to go, or I still felt like this, or I still couldn't do X, Y, and Z in a year's time, you'd be like, oh, that's actually a big change. So I think getting your head around that really then like fuels all the things that you need to do to like delve into the RNT process a little better.
And when people are thinking about what the cost of it, of not doing it is, what sort of areas and domains are we considering here or thinking about?
I think if we look at like physique development, a lot of people see what people achieve, especially with RNT and their socials, and think that's achievable in that time period. And they've achieved so much. And then they also look at the externals as well. So if we always talk about a physical transformation, and then we look and say, oh, they've achieved that, but they also, this, busy person managed to level up in their business and they got promotion, they're seeing more of their family and they're spending quality time with people. So I think that it's about kind of, it's what comes along with all of those benefits as well. So yes, you're going to look great, for example, if that's one of your key goals, but also are you going to level up in all of those different areas is sometimes the way you can look and think, it's not just the one thing, but if I'm better with my time, if I'm making better decisions, I have the short-term benefit of maybe looking great, but I have the long-term benefit of spending time with family and being a little better, and rubbing off on my kids is one that we see a lot where it's kids are taking part. So it's all of those external benefits. It's almost countless what you can achieve if you really kind of delve in.
Yeah, I love it. I remember reading a Tim Ferriss article many years ago. It was called like he talked about a fear setting exercise. And he said whenever you're like stuck and paralyzed in fear of achieving a goal, the exercise to do is like, what's the cost of not doing it? And then going into like financial domain, physical domain, mental domain, spiritual, emotional, and all the different impact of not doing it. For example, if you try to lose weight every year, you want to lose weight, you're scared to do it. There's so much mental cost in that fear, or that mental cost of waiting another year, dragging your heels for another year, wasting time, energy, and all these other things that go along with it. It's hard to often make it tangible outside of just the monetary element. But if you add all these things up, it's astronomical. Ivan, what other things do we need to think about at this stage? Like if you're getting yourself into the zone of, should I do this? Should I not do it? Is it worth it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when it comes to goal setting, they get it backwards. They set these arbitrary short-term goals that, they saw their friend on Instagram sign up for a challenge and they're like, I want to do a challenge because my friend's doing it. And I think a lot of people feed into this new year, new me goal setting shamble, and a lot of people fail. I think the last stats that I read up on was, 6% of people who set goals for the new year actually sustain them post 6 months. And I don't think this has got to do with the people just being bad people. I just think it comes down to a lack of clarity about what they want to achieve, but more importantly, the person that they need to become to achieve that goal. And I think a lot of people don't think about these things on a deeper level. Okay. So if we go back to the example of, where do you want to be in 12 months from now? A better question is to ask yourself is, what is my ideal self doing differently 12 months from now than I am now? And then you start to compare the two, and then you start to piece that together, right? So a lot of people don't view goal setting from that perspective, which I think causes a lot of these issues. Because if you have a clear goal on where you want to go, or more importantly, the person that you want to become, goal setting becomes so much easier, because once you have this big vision in mind, you can sort of reverse engineer that and start to set proper short-term goals to actually get there, not just random arbitrary goals, and this is the stuff that we go through with our members here at RNT. But I think for people who are not in our community and who are listening right now, I think it's really important to ask yourself that question, and then you can start to reverse engineer what that looks like, from 12 months from now, so to speak.
What is a tangible example of what you just described? Let's say someone's sitting there thinking, all right, this is where I am now. This is who I want to become. If you're in a position where you don't really know what that involves, or especially when it comes to health and fitness, how do you go around doing that exercise?
Yeah, and this is really tricky. And this is where, okay, you need to visualize, you need to see, okay, from 12 months from now, if I need to drop, say, 30, 40 kilos, okay, well, what is the version of you who is 30 to 40 kilos lighter? What are they doing differently on a day-to-day basis? Okay, they're probably meal prepping. Okay, they're probably training 3 or 4 times a week. You know what? They're probably getting 10,000 steps per day. They're probably prioritizing their water intake. They're making sure they get a good night's sleep, right? They are learning how to manage their emotions. They can go to social events and not, lose control. Now, again, these are just examples of traits that come with being successful 12 months from now. And this is where it's helpful to have an expert guide you on what is actually required to get there, because I don't expect someone to know, okay, well, what skills does my lean version have that I don't? Like, I don't think many people would know that off the bat. This is why it's important to be like, okay, cool, this is the place that you want to get to. And professionals at what they do will be able to tell you, okay, well, these are the skills that you require to get there. And this is how we're going to achieve them. Okay. So we always talk about, our members coming in with the why for why they want to do everything they want to do. And we will show them the how. Okay. And I think that's the best way to approach this, because we are the professionals at what we do, meaning that we can pave the way and pave the road to allow them to get there. They just need to come with the why, and they need to come with a reason far more powerful than what they initially think. We always talk about what's the why behind the why behind the why behind the why, and once that is in a good spot, I think everything else is much easier to do.
Okay, so you've understood the cost of inaction. You know who you want to be, and you know why you're doing this. You made the decision to jump in, go all in, and make this the year that you finally get in shape. What next, Shona? What happens next in the journey that you need to be aware of to help you maximize the starting point of a transformation?
I think identifying exactly what you can start with is going to be really, really helpful. So off the back of goal setting, I think especially going into the new year, it's very easy to get swept up in the momentum of new year, new me. I'm going to sign up for a marathon. I'm going to do this diet. I'm going to train 5 to 7 times a week. But when you look at your calendar each week, you're thinking, I don't actually know when I'm going to fit that in. So when you're making these promises to yourself, it's really, really important to think about the time that you actually have available. And planning is definitely something that will come up later in the process as well. But before you even get started, you need to know how much time each week you can actually dedicate to these goals. So you can be more realistic with whether you can do 3 training sessions a week or 5, or how many times you need to meal prep based on your work schedule. So I would be then looking at the calendar and blocking in everything that you've got already. So things like work, things like sleep, and things like home life and commitments. And then you can see exactly where in your week you can dedicate time to these other things that you're thinking of putting in.
I think you made a good point in that this will help you this dictate whether it's 3 sessions or 5 sessions. Maybe one for Ed now. If you're someone who's sitting and thinking, I can't even do any sessions, this is, it's not a question of doing too much. It's actually like, how do I even fit those 3 in? What's the approach you got to take here, where health is a priority, but you're starting to justify time is an issue, my family, the kids, when I'm going to fit this all in?
I think the best thing I'd do probably is just take it all the way back and just try and write out your top probably 3 priorities for 2024, just in all areas of your life. And if transformation or fitness isn't in the top 3, it's going to make it a little bit harder, but I think it's got to be at least in that top 5. If it's not, you're probably not even listening to this, but if you are listening to this, it's probably going to be another year of no action, to be honest. But if it is something that's high up, I would then try and make sure that how your days, your weeks, your months, how you're planning out your year reflect those top 3 priorities. And so if it is things like your family, your career, your health, whatever those things are, is then just making sure that you're actually living in line with those priorities. And so often we can get caught up in this sort of, I've got no time, or I've got no control. And it normally just comes back to actually just feeling like there's a lack of control, because time is just one of those things we're not controlling. But the reality is we're in control of way, way more than what most people feel like. And that's actually, going to Ivan's point around like the whole identity thing, is probably the biggest differentiator I see between people who transform and don't. It's people who basically just take ownership of their journey. Because the people who don't, who live in this victim mindset, who always feel like there's no control, I have no time, I've got no choices, all of this, they just spin their wheels. And their lives, at least on paper, are no harder than the people you see who do take control. I've seen some of the most, like crazy and tough lives that I've seen working with clients have actually got the best results. So it's not like a correlation between who's actually got the hardest thing, and so much this perception. And so when you start taking ownership of your life, basically looking at what you can control, that's where all the magic happens. Because you may feel like, I've got no time at all. But if you get up at 6:30 every morning, you probably do have an hour and a half. You just need to get up at 5 o'clock. yeah, that might mean you need to go to bed a bit earlier. But that means you need to start practicing some restraint around bedtimes and not watching so many episodes of Netflix or whatever it is. Adding in some systems around that evening routine frees up the morning. Bam, suddenly got an hour and a half every single morning to exercise, which you didn't have before. And although we can't control everything in our lives, we can control way more than a lot of the time we initially think. And because the stuff we can't control, we just can't control it. There's no point wasting any more time on it. If you stop wasting time thinking about stuff you can't control and focus on what you can, that's where all the action takes place, and that's where all the magic then happens. So to, I guess, summarize that ramble a bit, I'd say just lay out your top 3 priorities so you know what you need to be basing your life around, but then zone in on what can you control, not that what's easy, but what can you actually control to make sure that those things can then start to be implemented in your life.
What are some examples of things you can and can't control?
I think in terms of like what you can't control is potentially like how are your kids going to sleep that night, what your boss says to you at work. Thankfully, I'm not in that position. You can't do that, but how you react to all those things, you can be. And I actually heard another podcast. I can't remember who exactly said it, but it's a really nice way of framing it. It was like you can live life on easy mode or hard mode. And it's basically if you control what you can control, you're living on easy mode. So if your kid wakes up 5 times throughout the night, you can't prevent that from happening. But if the day before you've exercised, so you've been feeling good, you fueled well, you went to bed at a good time, you've minimized how bad that's going to be. Whereas if you didn't go to bed till 2 a.m. because you were eating junk and watching Netflix, and then your kid woke up 5 times, and then you haven't even got clothes laid out for the next day, you haven't got any food prepped, like that's just going to spiral down into like a really rough next day. And either way, if your kid wakes up 5 times a night, it's not going to be the best day the next day, but it can be way better if you're living that life on that easy mode. And so making sure, I think the easiest ones are around time management normally. So making sure that you're blocking out sufficient time for sleep, blocking out time for exercise, basically this whole make time, not trying to find it kind of saying. Because things don't always go to plan, but if you've made that time 9 times out of 10, you will be able to get it done, rather than just chasing your tail, trying to find that time, which, as you know, if you don't block it out, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's really good. I've not heard that analogy, but I really like it. Easy mode.
Yeah,
and
just
hard
on
mode.
that, Ed, the easy mode, hard mode, for those who are listening, the author is Shane Parrish. And he wrote the book Clear Thinking, and he's been on a few podcasts recently, and I heard the same thing.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his name,
really
but I was like, I really like that. Yeah,
a lot of his stuff resonates with all the stuff that we talk about, which is great. So
any nuggets? Any nuggets to share from what you've heard so far?
Well, literally just that, how to put your life on easy mode. Easy mode and hard mode, I think is fantastic. People think that this whole thing has to be a grind and it's a struggle. And, I'm a warrior for eating vegetables. It's like, no, you're not. There are ways to implement all this stuff that does put your life. It can make you can do it in an easier versus a hard way. And I think we've spoken about this before. The better you get at dieting, right? The more times you do it, the more times you've done it over the years, you end up getting in better and better condition with less suffering. You don't have to always be suffering with a diet or with this whole thing. Like, you're going to have to make some changes when you first start, and it's going to be different. But if you're literally suffering from like day one, you're doing it incorrectly, completely incorrectly, So yeah, those are the biggest insights I got from that.
Nice. Shifting gears to someone who's figuring out which mode you're on, Chloe, with your recent move. I'm sure you're sort of trying to find your new structure, strategy, and system to help you find the right lifestyle solution for you at the moment. So it's probably a good chance to bring you in on this with regards to like building that initial structure as someone who's doing it real time. What are some key things that's helping you that will help someone who's starting this journey when it comes to building a structure of time blocking training, time blocking nutrition, and whatever else that needs to be done in the day?
Yeah, so it's definitely difficult adjusting to, obviously I'm adjusting to like the 11-hour time difference moving from UK to Australia. So it's been a big change, and I was chatting to Ed about it on my check-in. With the biggest struggle I'm having with is just a like sleep routine, but I think it's partially like my that's something I can control better by like making sure I'm going to bed at a set time and waking up at a set time. But it's very easy to get into the routine. If I can't fall asleep straight away, then I start like laying in a bit longer than I should. And then that's when the routine doesn't sort of fall in place, because I'm just keep going over that. So if I actually just like starts that bedtime, then my bedtime will come earlier, so I just need to wake up like at that time. So I think that's where it's key in terms of like actually sticking to like this structure with your sleep to start your day well, because then if you wake up later, then you're then pushing back everything else, because a lot of people have to get their training in before or after work. But if you've missed that before work slot, then that training session's missed. After work, you then might feel a bit too tired to do it and you put it off again. And then that's when people start to miss things out of the week. So I do find that I like to have as much routine as possible. So I've tried to keep my meal timings the same. Nutrition is something that I've just kept consistent with, and keeping it simple. I'm just eating exactly what I was eating back in the UK, but there might be a few like brand swaps. But I'm finding that at the moment, just sticking to the same meal plan every day is really helping just keep things easy, rather than changing it up every day.
There's a couple of things there. If you're talking about the easy mode, it's like if you're starting this transformation journey, it's eating the similar foods on a day-to-day basis, is setting set meal times on a day-to-day basis, so you're not wondering when you're going to eat and what you're going to eat. You can take those two things out, and then all you need to do is decide when you're going to train, and suddenly you've probably taken the three hardest decisions out of the way. One thing, Chris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on is how we avoid that death by a thousand cut scenario of you miss one workout and then suddenly you think, oh, I'll do it in the evening, but then you don't do it in the evening. Then you say, I'll do it in the morning, you don't do it in the morning, and then the next thing you know, you've lost a week. And then you just give up. Ivan mentioned earlier the stats around, was it 6%? And I think a lot of it probably just comes from an element of that, of where you fall off once or twice and that snowballs like crazy. And the next thing you know, you've just not gone anywhere. So how do what sort of systems do we need to put in place to avoid that?
Yeah, I think I look at it in like two different ways and think, what practically can I do to try and give myself the best chance of avoiding those scenarios? But then when I'm in those scenarios and have missed things have crept up and life has happened, what's my mindset towards almost like, is this the end of the diet? And people speak about it a lot, whether you're all in on a diet or not, or whether you're all in on a process or not. And the only time it really becomes jeopardizing to the overall process is when you kind of have that thought process of, I've missed this, therefore my diet is out the window, or that I've missed this training session, therefore my training is ruined for the week. When in actual fact, the only thing that ruins the week is that actual thought process. So I think it's almost not considering anything on like a strict time frame. You want to have that structure, don't get me wrong. And I always say when we spoke about, I mentioned practical things, I always say to clients, plan out your week. Being organized is going to be really helpful. But if you can identify some areas where maybe if life happens, you may be able to just shift things around. So if you know on Saturday afternoon you are, maybe doing X, Y, and Z, but that is kind of tangible, can move it around a little bit. Is that somewhere where if something happens on Tuesday afternoon with your kids and you have to go pick them up from school and you weren't able to train in the afternoon? Are there a couple of areas in my diary I can look at it? But I think from the mindset perspective as well, that's going to be one of the biggest things where we look and go, just because you missed one workout, just because we made one mistake, it only really becomes a mistake if you allow it to kind of have volume and carry on across the week and stuff, and getting out of that mindset. And we see it when people react to food, right? Like I had a client this week like check in and say, oh, I think I've miscalculated a meal and my weight spiked up a little bit. I had this meal out and I did X, Y, and Z. What should I do tomorrow? Or what should I do today because my weight's gone up? And I was like, don't worry about it. There's no point stressing over it too much. We reflect on it for a minute. We take some thoughts and go, what could I have done better? Right, that's fine. I'm back on my plan today. And they said, I was actually going to go for a really long run. And I was like, well, that would have just made you hungrier and more tired and then more likely to maybe make a mistake in future. So certainly not encapsulating things to like 1 day, week, X amount of time, just being as controlled as you can, being as organized as you can. And I think if you've done the organization bit and you have a standard of what you'll hold yourself to, we say it with meals out, like you can't be 100% perfect, but what you can do is put a plan in place. And even Ivan was talking about this on a podcast, even if the scale didn't go down and you wanted it to because you had a meal out, if you went and said, I'm going to drink diet drinks, I'm going to focus on protein, and I'm going to stick to one plate. That's success because you highlighted some key areas. And back to what we were identifying at the start of the podcast, we're saying, what can we do? Be organized, have those plans in place, and you can be like, that was successful. And then you're back on the program the next day and the weight drops the next day. It's almost nothing. So I think that answered your question. I sometimes go on some tangents for people, but
no, you definitely covered it. And one element that this probably like talks about is the element of like the frog. You know, you hear this the analogy of like eating the frog. When you miss one workout and you miss another one, that frog just gets bigger and bigger, and it starts playing in your mind. You start thinking about it all day long because you've missed the workout or you've missed a walk, and it starts wearing you down, and you start feeling guilty, and it's just a vicious cycle that goes over and over again. And sometimes I think the only way you can really break it is by just doing something small. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or out of control, like Ed was describing, and the idea of a 60-minute workout with a 15-minute commute either way is not doable, maybe you just need to do a 10-minute home workout to just get you to just kill that first frog, and then get yourself back into the momentum of driving to the gym or whatever you need to do to get there. But I think if you can avoid that initial dip which comes in the journey, it can help you often go all the way. But if you fall victim to that frog and you just get eaten by it, instead of eating it yourself, then you just sort of stuck back at square one. And I think this inconsistency is where most people struggle with. It's the inconsistency element of like a diet and training that stops people achieving the goals they want to achieve.
Yeah, and it makes them feel like they've been dieting for 3 years or 10 years.
Well, so talk on that now, Ivan. If we're thinking about where we are in the journey now, we're probably about 4 to 6 weeks in, and this element of like getting in and getting out and avoiding this dietary fatigue that you can put yourself into if you just do this for years and years. Talk about the dangers of doing that, and then why you need to just clip off the body fat as fast as possible in a safe way.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. You touched on a big part of it just then, where people have this one thing that goes wrong. It's either people assume that all in means either I'm 100% or 0%. No, that's not what you mean by all in. All in means, you nail the plan 100% when you can, but when you have to adapt, you adapt appropriately and you keep moving forward. Because unless you're a robot living in a bloody lab, there is no way that you're going to be able to nail everything to the letter until you hit checkpoint. Okay, it's just physically not possible, which is fine. We all have lives, we all have families, we all have things that pop up. But if we go back to what Ed was saying about the differentiating factors about the people who succeed and don't, another big factor is the ones who, again, ask themselves, okay, what's in my control? What can I do to keep moving forward? They don't fall victim to their circumstances. They make the most of their circumstances. And if we go back to the question that you just asked, I think for this perpetual dieting cycle, because technically, if you were dieting for 3 years, properly, you would be physically dead because you were losing weight that entire time. So if you've been dieting for 10 years, you actually haven't been dieting. You've been dieting for a couple of weeks, then you have a diet break for about 2 weeks, and then you go back into a diet, this and that. So I think one of the best ways to get through this process phase, to get in and out, is, again, what can we do to put this whole thing on easy mode? Easy mode is you follow a set meal plan. Variety is so overrated when it comes to a fat loss phase, in my opinion. I think people shoot themselves in the foot trying to play macro Tetris, calorie Tetris. I want this, I want that, making 10,000 meal plans for their process phase. No, get rid of all that. That is way too much mental bandwidth. You are playing on hard mode, So easy mode is finding a meal plan that you really enjoy, maybe making a few changes here and there, but the majority of it should stay the same. You have these set meal times. You just eat at this time, no questions asked. The more automated you can make this whole process, the better. The beautiful thing about what we do here is that we take out all that guesswork. We take that out. So it's like you don't have to think about whether you should have 100 grams of chicken or 200 grams of chicken. You just eat what you've been given, and then you just execute, check in, stay accountable, and we'll give you that feedback to keep you moving forward. So the less mental bandwidth that you can spend on all these little minor things, which do add up across the day, I think the easier your journey is going to be through that process phase. And this is not to say just put your blinkers on and just don't learn. You can still learn through this process, but the easier you can make things around you, the better this journey is going to be. And you can get out even if you've got like a lot of weight to lose, you can get out of this process phase within 6, 9, 12 months if you do it properly. It doesn't have to be another 2, 3, 10-year ordeal, which again, I think the average time American women spend on dieting from memory was they spend 33 years of their life dieting. And that's a haunting stat.
Wow.
And I'm like, damn, that's a lot of mental fatigue and a lot of energy wasted for what? Which you could have done properly 6 to 12 months, get it done, move on with your life, move into the lifestyle solution, and live the best life possible.
I feel like in America it's way worse. I mean, it's also. I had a podcast with Dipple last week, and she was talking about how she's now nearly 48. She was saying she spent a decade using creams, weight loss creams, sculpting machines, like things you put on the machines you put on your body, all sorts of, like, she was describing things I'd never even heard of. And I thought, that's torture. For 30 years, she was trying to do it. And only now at 48 was she able to achieve the body that she'd always wanted to. Shona, what is a good rate of fat loss per week that you should aim for? Because what we don't want to have the perception of is you should just lose as quick as possible. So what is the good rate of fat loss to achieve, no matter how much you have to lose?
That's a really great question, because I think it's very easy to take, aiming to get in and out of the fat loss phase as fast as possible to, I need to lose as much weight as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think this is one way you really need to avoid comparing your rate of progress to somebody else's, because it's very easy to look at someone else and say, well, they dropped 3 kilos in a week, why can't I do that? But you might be very, very different weights. So for something like this, I think percentages are an awful lot more helpful. So taking maybe 0.5 to 1% being ideal of your body weight each week, that's going to be a really good rate of loss, because it's not so slow that you're not seeing any changes, because you do want to see changes on a week by week basis. But it's also not so fast that it reaches a point where it's unsustainable. And unsustainable is a funny word, because again, you don't want to be dieting for 30 years. It should only be just sustainable enough to get you out of that phase, but it still needs to be something that you can keep up for long enough to get out of the diet. And that's a good mid-ground.
Love it. And Ed, if you're losing 1% a week every single week, and then all of a sudden you don't decide not to go further, what differentiates someone who gets a good transformation and someone who gets a jaw-dropping, you have to look twice type transformation?
So they're dropping 1% every week.
As in they're dropping 1% a week, and then suddenly get complacent. They start thinking, is this worth it? Start questioning whether they want to go any further.
I look good enough.
Yeah, you look good enough. The reality is you're probably better than you were, but not where you could be.
I think it's probably going back to what you initially wanted to achieve, because what you've probably achieved at that point is a much better place than where you started, but you're probably not actually at that pinnacle of what you set out to do. And it's probably where the difficulties of the journey are starting to increase. And so your return on investment probably is starting to just become hard to come by. At the beginning, you stick 80% to the plan. All you get is positive comments from everyone else. You're seeing really big drops on the scale. As you start to get close to your checkpoint, or as you get leaner, you're having to stick to the plan more closely to see potentially less absolute weight dropping off each week, potentially starting to get some jealous comments or some critique from those around you. And it's just harder from just a physical perspective, like you're probably a bit more hungry, energy levels are a little bit lower. And so in the moment, the trade-off may not feel quite as worth it or as easy as it was at the beginning. And it's not as easy as it was at the beginning, but what you're achieving is obviously a lot harder. But I think something to remember at that point is that this is a very short-term place, if you want it to be. Now, if you muck around, you check in once every 3 weeks, you're on the plan 2 days, you're off it for 3 days, you can hang around there forever, and you literally get the worst of both worlds. You don't make any progress and you just feel worse and worse. However, if at that point you lead into the process and you look ahead to beyond that grind phase to what's coming after, not only can you see how you're going to physically look once you get through that other end, because once you drop those next few kilos, or that whatever that is between where you're at now and your checkpoint, your physique's going to look drastically different. But that's where like the real life-changing parts come into play, because once you get out of the fat loss phase, you're in consolidation, food comes up, so life just becomes like a bit more sustainable again. But you've just achieved something that you probably never really believed was possible for yourself. And you've now got something that you can look back on as this huge confidence boost. Because I think one of the biggest things you get from transformation is committing to something that's really hard and actually seeing it through. Because so many of us commit to things in our lives, but then they've just bottled it. And it's so easy now, probably easier than ever with social media and everything, just to say these big goals. And you probably see it, but people's words are probably never worth less than they are right now. And it actually touched on something that Shona said at the beginning around we make promises to ourselves. And this is a time when you actually make it a promise. Everyone says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But until you actually back that up with action, it's just bullshit, isn't it? Right. And that's how you make your words mean something. You back them up with action. You do that consistently. People actually care what you have to say. But the most important thing is you care what you have to say. Because when your opinion of what you think and what you say improves, your self-love and that sounds a bit like hippie-ish, but like the confidence you have in yourself and like the content that you have with just the person you see in the mirror just goes through the roof. And I think that's the biggest thing from transformation is just actually being proud of the person you are. And like a big part of the pride I have myself is just knowing that I just back up what I say. I do if I do something, if I say I'll do something, I'll do it. And that's massive in terms of like my own confidence anyway. I think that's a huge thing that you take away from that last period. You know it's going to be hard, but you commit to it and you back it up with action. And then when you're out of the diet, you're in consolidation, said like food's higher, cardio is lower, you're finding this more sustainable way to live. You've got all of that in the bank, but without having to be in that dieting mode anymore. And you can use that for everything else post-diet. But you just have to be able to see beyond that point, because those last 3, 4, 6 weeks potentially dieting, they'll feel never ending. And you may feel like I'm never going to get out of this. But you just need to remember this isn't life. This is a short-term blast before you then use what you achieve in that time for the rest of your life. And you can think about it for other areas of life you've probably been in, where you're an accountant and it's the end of the tax year, you have this beast of a month where you just have to like just blitz it, but you know that's not how your life is going to be for the rest of the year. You have this big month and then things get better. When you were at school, everyone probably crammed for exams last minute. You know that's not like how it is forever. You just commit to something, get the reward you want, so you can then move on with the life, you know, in a better place.
On that, it's like one of the very few things left in this world that you can't purchase. You can't buy that transformation. You can't buy the confidence there. You have to work for that. You have to work to earn the respect of what you see in the mirror. And this is why I think it doesn't matter what your end product looks like. It's more about like what you had to do to become that end product. And I think that is where this is why transformation is relevant to everyone. Just because you don't have to have 0% body fat by the end of your transformation and have abs popping and fucking veins everywhere. That's all great. But the biggest benefit that comes from that is, saying to yourself, I did that. Truthfully saying, I did this. I made this change. I did it. I couldn't cheat this. You know? And the confidence that gives you, I think, is second to none in everything. Because if you can do that to your own physique, to your own body, to your own mind, you can do anything that you set your mind to. And that, in my opinion, is where the true magic lies of grind. You know, it's not just that physical change. It's everything else that comes from that. And then, as Ed just said earlier, you know, if you can do that, like, man, imagine what you can do with your physique later on. You know, like if you can get through that and smash it, the world is your oyster. But we know people do fall into traps in consolidation, don't we?
Segues nicely.
Sorry, just to ruin the segue, just to jump in on that, is like not just the physique though, it's everything. Like when your kid is up in the middle of the night and you're so tired, you're like, well, I've done worse. Like you can think back to specific days when you're in the grind and you're like, I got through that. Like this isn't actually that bad. And just having that confidence in, I've done this, I've beaten this self-limiting belief before in my physique. Why can't I do it public speaking when I go into this meeting or whatever it is? Once you've got that confidence that you back up what you say, it will transfer to all areas. And once you're more and more confident in the person you are and you like the person you are, that will filter into every aspect of your life, not just how you're looking and how you're training.
And it'll make staying in shape really, really easy, because you probably will have less vices. You'll have less cravings for distraction or whatever vices you want to fall down to, and you'll maintain everything you've got. I think, Ivan, you mentioned there's a study. Right? Yeah, you mentioned there's a study on that, right? That there's a direct correlation between, is it happiness and fulfillment and staying in shape or something like that?
Chasing goals. Yeah. So goal achievement, setting goals. there's definitely a big correlation there between chasing goals, pursuing goals, and fulfillment and enjoyment. Is that the one you're talking about? Or are you talking
No,
about
it was something like weight maintenance or keeping the weight off.
Oh, wait, yeah. So for every year you're able to keep the weight off and maintain it, you double your chances of keeping it off the following year.
I mean, that was one of them. The other one I was thinking of that you mentioned is like you're more likely to stick to your diet, or you're more likely to keep the weight. You've mentioned so many studies. I've lost count now, but
I lost track of all of them too.
I think the basic premise was, I think this is what you said, is that the more in tune you're living your life with your priorities, or the more happy you feel in your life, the easier it is to keep the weight off, because easier is to keep the weight off
because you're happy.
Yeah. That was basic. That was the basic premise.
Happy, yeah. Again, this can be taken the wrong way. Some people actually do the whole fitness thing to escape their reality. That's not what we're talking about here.
Of course.
But yeah, there does seem to be a big correlation between because again, we all know it's much easier to stick to your diet. It's much easier to stick to your routine when you yourself feel happy in your life, right? There's a huge correlation there. You know, when everything else around you is going well, it's very easy for you to keep doing what you need to be doing. You know, so yeah, there's definitely a huge correlation between happiness and routine, well-being, all that stuff. Yeah,
it's one of those weird things because that helps staying in shape, but at the same time, in order to feel better, you need to do this. Yes. It goes both ways, right? So speaking of consolidation, that we're going to segue into is Chloe. You're just coming out of, or still in consolidation. I suspect you're coming out of it now. What are some of the dangers of not consolidating effectively, and what do you need to do to make sure it's a safe passage home and a smooth transition into a lifestyle solution?
Yeah, it's definitely a dangerous place for a lot of clients that I've noticed, that it's easy to sort of get excited and caught up. You've just hit your checkpoint and you can become easily like relaxed during the period. Like you can think, oh, okay, I can get away with this now. I want to celebrate. I was in fat loss for this many months and now I want to enjoy a bit of flexibility. But I think it's important to not rush towards getting that, because I think people think as soon as they come out of fat loss, they've suddenly got the lifestyle solution and they want to have these untracked meals and start to include like loads of different variety of meals every day. And that sort of goes back to that sticking to that similar meal plan. During consolidation, I'd say to anyone to just stick with what you were doing in fat loss with your meal plan. So having that similar meal plan or plans each day, but the difference is you're just having more calories, because you'll find that just doing that is just a nice way to get out of your fat loss without losing the routine. And the extra calories are the excitement, because most people are finishing on such low calories that any extra food you might be adding in, like the carbs might be coming back into your meals. So you start to like add variety in that way. And then over time, when you then move into the next phase, so into investment, that's when you'll start to learn how to include them untracked meals and more flexibility. But it's definitely not the time to do it straight away, because it can just get easy to become a little bit too relaxed and you find that you go back to them old habits. So whatever got you to your checkpoint is going to keep you in shape. So it doesn't mean that once you're in shape, you can suddenly go back to them old habits.
What are the dangers, Chris, of a poorly executed consolidation phase?
So I think like the first one that people would identify, especially if they've gone quite deep and got that grind phase that we talk about, is like you're in a really compromised position to put body fat on quite quickly. You're probably quite hungry, because hunger is a part of that grind phase. It's something that you do have to deal with, and it's not the end of the world. I think when people call it hunger pains, I get a little annoyed because I don't think it's that painful, but a different sentence. But people are hungry and then they are more inclined, they relax and they start to want to consume higher calorie foods. If you haven't listened to any of your coach, you'll have been watching food videos on the internet and suddenly you are quite food focused, and suddenly the things that kept you in check and got you to where you wanted to be, like Chloe said, start to fade away. And we start to look, as we kind of come out of that phase, is like what can we chase that's a performance goal? What can we look to move towards that's going to allow us to just really want to make those or sustain those changes that got us to where we are? What goal can we put in place to try and look after those? So if you aren't setting goals and you fall into that trap, like you said, of not having something to focus on, you feel like you've achieved everything, you will find that it becomes more difficult. And it's a lot easier I always say to clients, like, it's a lot easier to, I use drinking as a good example sometimes. It's a lot easier to say no to a drink on a Saturday night if you want to get a PB on a Sunday morning. And when you make that transition from like trying to chase that positive on a Sunday morning away from, I do want a drink, but I'm not going to have one because I'm trying to get shredded, it's great that we can do both. But as you transition into the second one, you find actually the lifestyle solution starts to integrate quite well. So it's just a really compromised position for you, and you need to control it as well as the dieting phase in a lot of cases, especially at the start, you're a little fatigued and hungry and stuff. So a dangerous position, but manageable for sure.
Spot on. And as Ivan mentioned with the research, the longer you keep it off, the easier it is to keep it off as well. So Ivan, what we've seen to be the common traits of successful dieters, or probably not the right word, but the people that keep the weight off long term. Why do people keep the weight off long?
It's a great question. So what I noticed, and the research backs this up, which is great as well, is that people who have more intrinsic motivation to stay in shape. So what I mean by intrinsic motivation is that you are doing this for you. And a good way to ask yourself is, am I intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated by this behavior? Is, would you continue doing this behavior if no one was looking? You know, would you continue eating well? Would you continue weighing yourself? Would you continue doing all these things that you were doing if there was no one to report to? That's a really good way to know if this is a intrinsic motivator for you. Another important component is, learning how to manage stress, learning how to manage emotions. I think this is a massive skill that is very underrated, especially when it comes to not only getting to checkpoint, but especially post checkpoint, because what trips up a lot of people post checkpoint is that they don't have that scale weight number that keeps them in check, right? Every week during a process phase, you're rewarded for your efforts. I did well, look at my weight loss. Awesome. And you're motivated to keep doing that, because in your brain, it's just like, wow, this is great. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I'm getting that reward. Okay. So another key component for long-term satisfaction, long-term sustainability is, okay, how can we gamify that same system in a different way? You know, so it's learning how to recognize daily wins. It's learning how to recognize wins in the gym, as Chris was saying. You know, can you be better than what you were last week in the gym? Can you lift a bit more weight? Can you lift with better technique? Can you nail your nutrition even better? You know, can you nail your steps even better? You learn to love the process. And another component there is being process driven, not outcome driven. Okay. People who succeed in this game over the long term, they learn to love the day-to-day monotony. I'm saying that in quotation marks, but it's learning to enjoy that. And the more you can enjoy that process, and the more that you can recognize how, you know, eating well makes you feel, how it makes you function, how exercise does the same for you. You sleep better. You're a better human being when you look after yourself. You're a better father. You're a better mother. You're a better everything when you yourself are healthy. That in and of itself can be a massive motivator to stay in shape, because you need that. You need a motivator that's going to keep you. It's going to tell yourself, I don't want to go out and drink on a Saturday night because, I've got a PB to hit on Sunday. But more importantly, I just want to be the best parent I can be on Sunday morning. You know, Sunday's family day. I want to be fresh for my kids. You know, that sort of mentality, right? So we've got the intrinsic motivation, we've got being process driven. Identity is a huge one. You know, you have to identify with this new person. You have to identify as a lean, healthy individual. And from what we see, you know, it may take 6 to 12 months to get all the physical weight off, but to lose like the emotional and mental weight, that can take years, 2-3 years. And this is why it's so important to stay engaged post checkpoint. It's so important to stay accountable. Accountability, in my opinion, is far, far higher post checkpoint. I think you need way more accountability post checkpoint to help guide you on the right path, keep you on the right path, to prevent you from going back into old patterns and old habits when you're not getting that dopamine hit of, am I actually getting better every single week? You know, so those are probably the main things. Anything that you guys would add to that?
Shona?
Yeah, I would say to sort of develop on what you're saying, I think you have to be honest with yourself. If you want to be accountable to yourself and you want to be accountable to somebody else to keep doing the right thing, you have to be honest. Because I think it's very easy post checkpoint, especially when you have just come away from those really low calories, you maybe haven't been out for a meal for a long time, you maybe haven't had any drinks with your friends, to think, well, I can do this once or twice a week now because I enjoy doing it. But as you've said, Ivan, I would be paying very close attention to how you feel. So how are your energy levels? How is your sleep? How is your training quality? How do you really feel after making all of those choices? And if you're honest with yourself, is that really a good trade-off? I think that's really, really important post-checkpoint, especially.
Amazing. So as we wrap this episode up, we'll start with Ed because he made that bold statement of backing his words up with everything he says. What are your 2024 fitness goals, if any? What are you focusing on in the next 12 months?
I've actually thankfully locked in a couple prior to this. I didn't know you were going to ask me, but it went well. So I'm signed up to compete in High Rocks at the end of January.
Oh, you okay?
Yeah, it's been a little bit touch and go with the nerve issue in my leg, but I've touched wood as of like halfway through December. We're on track. So yeah, I might not qualify for the World Championships, but I think I at the moment should be able to finish.
Nice.
Then in April, I've actually signed up for a charity swimathon. I don't know if you guys said, but I'm terrible at swimming. But it's one of them things I've kind of always thought, right, I need to just for my ego's sake, like I need to just get a bit better. And I saw this. I was just taking my son swimming. I saw a flyer, so I've signed up with my wife just to do like a relay thing. So it's 1,500 meters, which for any good swimmer probably thinks that's nothing, but for me that's like the Tour de France. And then I'm also meant to be doing the 3 Peaks challenge, actually. So it's like you climb each of the highest peaks across the UK in a 24-hour period. So I don't know how physically demanding that is, but yeah, I'm looking to get that locked in for the summer as well. So hopefully tick off, those 3 in potentially the first half of the year, hopefully.
Nice. Action-packed. Chloe, how about yourself?
Well, we'll see if I actually back it up. Or whether
Yeah.
I was going to say, I didn't really want to follow on from Ed's like big goals for the year.
Yeah.
Big words.
But
yeah, it's big word. He's already got the dopamine of talking about it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, my goal is mainly to get my strength back up. Like at the end of my muscle building phase, my strength I was pretty happy with where my strength was at. Obviously, tried to maintain that as much as I could throughout my fat loss, but inevitably towards the end, that did drop off. My body weight, I lost 19 kilos, so I couldn't expect to, I guess, push the same amount of weight I was. But I want to be able to get my strength up to where it was when I was heavier, but at a lighter weight. So that's sort of my goal, to be able to maintain a leaner physique but build my strength up without being as heavy. So I'll see how that goes.
Nice. Chris, what about yourself? I know you're always full of ideas of different goals.
Yeah.
You knuckle down on it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's always a struggle for me because like I want to do everything, and that's probably why I didn't excel at sports. It's like I want to bodybuild and be a sport and play my sport, and I'm doing 2 in one day, and it was like, oh, okay. But I think that's one for me was like I want to drill down on something that like you can't cheat. So for me it was triathlon this year because I want to Ironman next year, and like you can't be like 50% in on the amount of distance that entails. And whilst I've done all of those things individually, it's going to take a consistent period of time. And I'm usually good at going really all in for short periods of time. And sometimes I don't know if I've challenged myself to really sustain something that takes such a long time, other than like playing my sport, which I could just do because I'm a child and I love it. But that's my goal, triathlon this year. So a little bit of knee rehab, which is going pretty well so far. And then it'll be
nice.
Whatever I need to do to triathlon this year and Ironman in Barcelona next year, I think.
Ed, did you know that Chris got like an 18-minute 5K?
Well, he was about 7 foot, so I think about 3 steps.
It's 12 steps. It was 12 steps.
No, I didn't know that. To be fair. That's impressive, Chris.
Yeah, I think I was like 10 kilos. It was in lockdown, and I was like 10 kilos lighter, and was just nothing else to do. So yeah, it was like 18, 20 something. But
mental.
Yeah, fair play.
Ivan, still on the handstand?
Yeah, man. Just it's a never-ending journey of just the way I see it. I think cross is actually coming, could be very soon. What's the date we're recording is December. I could potentially have it by end of January, maybe.
Oh wow!
My coach thinks he's put a lot of pressure on me now. I don't want it. I don't want that. I never want it to end. I don't want the journey to end. I want to be in this perpetual cycle of just chasing it.
You're gonna rebound.
I know once I get it, the dopamine comes in, So yeah, just been like a really, really long-term goal. And yeah, it just feels so close. And so hopefully get that done.
It's gonna be pretty emotional, isn't it? When you do that, it's gonna be pretty.
It will be.
I feel emotional.
I think it.
I've never known you. I've never known you not chasing this.
Yeah,
I know. So I reckon I'll get it and be like, okay, I could probably do it better. But that's the thing with this. It's like, okay, well, you get it, and then what? You can make it look better. You can make it cleaner. Okay, now do something else from there. So
yeah, nice.
It's a never-ending journey. And that's why I love this thing that I'm doing. It's just consistent improvement. And how I express that is just going to change from month to month, year to year. So that's the gymnastic stuff. Then the black stuff. I just want to, continue pushing, just seeing how hard I can push for an hour. It's probably going to be like a time trial thing that I might do and see how high I can get that number. But that doesn't really mean much to me. That's just more just a fun game and experiment.
Yeah, nice. And last but not least, Shona.
I can't not finish strong now. I'll be finishing up the phase I'm in. I've reached a good point, a point I'm happy with. I've been sort of ill the last couple of months, so training's not made as much progress, but I'm pretty happy with how things have progressed overall. So the main goal for 2024 is to get a shoot locked in and bring the best shape I can to that. I need to have a chat about targets and set in some definitive goals for that, but aiming to do that the first half of next year.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, big. Well, you can listen back to this in 6 months' time. Hopefully Ed and Ivan should be done and dusted. And Chris is on his way to a triathlon.
We'll have to come back and set some new goals.
Chloe's kept it nice and vague, isn't it? I like that one. It's like, just sort of trying to work on my strength while staying sort of lean.
I've got numbers in my head for each split.
But Chloe's actually approaching it the right way.
Yeah,
she has that mindset. She's going to have constant improvement.
Yeah,
that's the best way to be.
It's good.
Yeah.
And if I don't get it, it's just all off plan, and I'm fucked for the year.
Ed, you got to keep it.
I got injured my shoulder. I can't do it.
Yeah.
That's his usual excuse, isn't it? Oh yeah, got injured.
My usual excuse.
Ironically, one of the things for me next year is like not to get injured. If I can not get injured, because I use the same excuse all the time as well. Oh, yeah, got injured this. I put this year. I realized I counted. I've had to pull out of more running events than actually do the ones I've done.
No.
It's just embarrassing, right? So if I cannot get injured,
maybe the goal should be program your running accordingly.
Yeah. No injuries and no burnout. Okay, guys, awesome episode. And for those of you looking to transform your body, transform your life in 2024, make sure you re-listen, take some notes, get your goals set, and go all in on the process. If you want an expert guide, help you along every single step of the way to time collapse the results, then simply go to www.rntfitness.co.uk/start to take the first step in your journey. Can't wait to see you all crush it in 2024, and I look forward to sharing the journey with you.